Good Tuesday, everyone. Welcome to the Volquest.com podcast presented by our good friends at Blue Water Climate Control. Glad to have you along with us on this Tuesday. And don't forget to check out our friends at Blue Water Climate Control. Check them out online, bluewaterclimatecontrol.com. You can give them a buzz at 865-299-2290. Remember, they're going to do the right repair the right way the first time for any of your HVAC needs. Whatever you need, air conditioning, get ready for some heat in a few months, whatever, duct cleanup, clean out, whatever you need, they're going to take care of you at Blue Water Climate Control. With Austin Price and Rob Lewis, I'm Brent Hubbs. Plenty to get to on this podcast as Tennessee today is in full gear. Thursday, they have their first scrimmage. They have another scrimmage less than a week later. The old golfing analogy, Austin, that it's moving week or moving Saturday or whatever they call it in a golf tournament. It's moving week in the football world, right?
It is. I mean, you got two scrimmages and basically the next 7 days. And, you've got to make your move if you're any of these quarterbacks. And that's not to say that, you can't lose it if you play bad, because you sure can. But to me, you got to go out and win it. You got to go out and show what you can do. This is not something where these other guys are going to, make mistakes and fall back to you. I think you've got to go out and win it. And, and that goes for any of these positions, frankly. I mean, I thought Ellerby, kind of trying to keep the, competitive juices flowing when he met with the media on Monday was interesting because, we know that Jerome Carvin's going to start. I mean, that was to me as given as anything. If he didn't start at guard, he's going to start at center. Cade, if he didn't start at tackle, he's going to start at guard. I mean, and then so to say that he doesn't have a couple of starters would be erroneous. So I think that, I think they're trying to keep the competitive juices flowing, but I think they're trying to come to some realizations real quick at several different positions. And of course, we all talk about the quarterback position first.
Rob, in 8 days, is it an accurate assessment to say that Josh Heupel's, and look, there's always movement, but Josh Heupel has a really good idea who his top 22 are on both sides of the ball, or at least his top 22 in offense and defense combined?
Yeah, I would say there's a pretty good chance of, not that it's going to be written in stone, like AP just said, but I'd say he's going to have a very strong opinion about what his top 22 looks like, but an opinion that could be changed, depending on the final 2 weeks of prep before game week.
So what do we think the quarterback thing is? Looks like Brian Maurer's losing some reps a little bit, but go ahead, Rob. What do you think this thing?
I was just going to piggyback on what AP said. I thought that what Alex Gold said last week was kind of revealing about what he's looking for. He's not looking for the guy that goes out there and plays to not make mistakes. He's, like AP said, he's looking for somebody to win the job, to take the job, to be aggressive, to make plays, to push it down the field and be assertive. And certainly, I think that's partly true, but at the same time, you can't have that attitude, that mindset, and be forcing the action into and making those mistakes. But I do think that Coach Gold has kind of echoed what AP was saying, that he's looking for somebody to seize it as opposed to let other guys fall by the wayside.
Austin, you think they got a pecking order right now? Not that it's done, but do you think there's a pecking order, or do you think there's kind of a above the line, below the line with some guys right now?
I think there's above the line, below the line. I mean, I said on the general's quarters, because while I still believe you don't hitch your wagon to anybody at this point. I mean, they've not scrimmaged, but just the feel of it certainly feels like that this is a Milton versus Hendon Hooker showdown. And, if you were asking me to handicap it, I think Milton's the leader in the clubhouse. I think Hendon Hooker is sitting in the 2-hole. I think that Harrison Bailey's still in it in the 3-hole. And I don't think Brian Maurer, honestly, was ever in it at all.
And we'll see what happens on this Thursday scrimmage, because it's going to dictate a lot of things, because that's not to say they're not playing real football to this point, but Thursday, it's in the stadium. Coaches are in the box on the sideline. You got to go out and run this thing, and we'll see who can process the fastest. Because as Joey Halsey said when he met the media last week, the processing part of it is a huge part of this equation. Who can run the show pre-snap? Who can run the show when something breaks down post-snap?
Yeah, and just one last thing on the quarterback. Since we weren't there in the spring, AP was AP was the Volquest representative on the ground in spring practice. Hooker's a lot bigger than I thought. Milton's huge. But Hendon Hooker's a big kid.
Yeah, I think part of him, again, numbers can make you look smaller or bigger depending on what number you have. I think Hendon Hooker is a bigger guy, bigger than you see. I think in pads, I think that number 5 makes him look not as big as potentially he really is. And so, yeah, I mean, Milton's a different deal. I don't even count him like he's the exception. The rule is more Harrison Bailey, Hendon Hooker, Brian Maurer, and definitely, Hendon Hooker is much bigger than I think you see, on TV and or when you're at the stadium.
Plenty of other things to get to besides the quarterbacks, but I do want to ask this one quarterback question because Rob makes this point. It's a good point. Austin, we did not see them other than the one open practice and the spring game all spring long, so we didn't get a chance to see kind of the day-to-day of those guys during the spring. Is there a difference in Hooker? Do you see a difference in him now compared to the spring? And if you do, what is it with Hooker?
Confidence.
You don't think it's mechanical as much as it is just he's letting her rip, so to speak? He's got.
I mean, maybe fractions mechanically, but like I don't notice a huge difference. Me personally, maybe that's something that I mean, look, if you're a golf swing coach, we'll keep this in the golf analogy. If you're a golf swing coach, you're going to notice the little minute changes that your player makes, whereas like the common person, me being the common person, is not going to notice that. Same thing here. I mean, his arm may be at a different degree angle, or his footwork may be a little fraction
better. But
it's
not dramatic.
I'm not going to notice that. Yeah, it's not dramatic. It's just I think he's just carrying himself differently. It just seems like a more confident kid, and honestly, kind of felt that way at camps this summer. Just the way he kind of maneuvered out there. He out of all the quarterbacks, he's probably the most laid back of them all. He's very, very laid back.
All right, so let's move on beyond that, beyond quarterbacks. Let's talk about confidence. This team seems to have some, Rob. Are you buying or selling at this point? And we got Dane Davis on Monday talking about how miserable it was to come to work every day last year and how much better life is. And you've got Tyler Barron saying how different the program is. Players seem to be happy. You buying into that? Is that overblown? What are you taking away from the narrative that life is so much better and things are really better in this program right now?
Yeah, I mean, you got to see him play a game to know whether that really counts for anything. But I was going to harken back to what Tyler Barron last week. I mean, he didn't go so far. He didn't go as far as Dane Davis talking about it being miserable to come to work, but it was pretty clear. He made it abundantly clear that it was a different environment, and I think you've gotten that feeling from everybody that we've spoken to, is that this football's fun again. We talked about that some in the off season, but and certainly when you're losing, it makes it worse. The drudgery, if kind of tough, it can really up and pile on. But I think it's just real clear that this coaching staff has connected with these kids over this off season. And, again, how many wins is that worth on Saturday? I don't know. But the environment is, I mean, it just feels, even for us outsiders looking in, I mean, don't you guys think it feels different, just lighter, breezier when you're over there?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I do think it's always easier to nitpick, the people that were previously here. I mean, it was easier to nitpick Butch when he was gone, or Jeremy now that he's gone, whatever. But for those kids, I think we all agree that they just needed to be built up mentally, which is why you saw them having so much fun and doing all these team bonding activities and all that stuff. I mean, last year's group was different because of the COVID. They all kind of, but before that, I mean, like, how much fun were they having off the field? I don't know. I mean, I do think this group genuinely is having fun, and I do think there's a value in that. The chemistry as a team, the chemistry as a staff, better quarterback play, all that stuff adds up to something. Again, what's it worth? I don't know. I can't equate that, but I can say that I do think it's worth something that helps Tennessee this fall.
Well, and I'll say this. I think Dane Davis was talking not about Jeremy Pruitt. I think he was talking about offensive staff. I think he was just talking about the year.
That offensive line
general.
did not like Will Friend at all. Hubbs. You know it, and I know.
Yeah,
So.
I don't think. Yeah, they
And they're just happy to have a change of voice.
Right. Well, they are. I think they're happy to have a change of voice. I also think they're happy just that things feel a little bit normal, and I think that's playing into some things. I'm curious because that's become such a big deal or a bigger deal with everybody talking about it. Boy, it's it's a lot different. I'm in, and all of those things. I'm just wondering what you guys do. Do you make too big, or can you make too big of a deal of that because of what you're saying, Austin? Because it's easy to take a jab at who's not here now, um, after the fact, so to speak.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, I think this is probably the first. We joked about this, on Monday, Hubs. I mean, first time in 12 plus years where we've not really made a thing out of the strength coach at all off season. Hadn't really talked about it, none of that. But yet, honestly, when you look at some of the gains or losses on this team, for guys, like, Byron Young to add 25 pounds, for guys like Darnell Wright to lose 25 pounds, or Aubrey Solomon to look way more like someone who can help this football team than he ever did a year ago. Those are all things that, like, again, we hadn't really talked about, and you potentially could. Same thing there. I mean, I think that, are we overblowing it? Are we, not giving it enough attention? I don't know. I do think that, though, that this team's chemistry is a lot better. Again, though, it all boils down to the quarterback, and it all boils down to depth. I think depth-wise, they're the wrong injury away from being in real trouble at a couple of different positions. But there are some positions where they could, withstand a key injury or two.
Rob, this is a better-looking football team. I mean, whether this is because of the strength coach, whether this is a result of last year not having a legitimate off season and guys trying to do stuff from their house with, water buckets or cement buckets, and not having a legitimate weight room to work out in, whatever the case may be, this is a different looking football team and a better looking football team, really from top to bottom. I mean, you don't have to be a football expert to see that, do you?
No, and I think you're right. I mean, I think you're right to mention that last off season was worse. I mean, kids were at home, doing push-ups and chin-ups and whatever they could, as opposed to this year. I mean, but it's clear that some guys have made some gains. I mean, AP, the guy that jumped out to me the most was Byron Young. I mean, I know we didn't see him a lot in the spring, but he looks like he added. I mean, sometimes you hear a coach throw out, a guy gained 30 pounds in the off season, and you kind of roll your eyes a little bit. I think that's legit with Byron Young. I mean, he looked almost like a wide receiver, I thought, in the spring, playing outside linebacker, and now he looks like an SEC edge player.
Yep, having 3 square meals a day, and as he told me, guys throwing snacks at him every time he walks by the nutrition center certainly helps there. For as much as he looks, Austin, improved with the weight gains, the offensive line just looks better. I mean, we've talked about Darnell Wright losing weight. I thought Jerome Carvin on Monday, I asked Jerome, I said, how much weight have you lost? And he said he was down 5 pounds. He's just moved stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's a lot leaner than he was. I mean, I think credit to strength coaches, but I do think it's another sign of this offensive line or players on this team, buying into things, because they do look better from their summer work. Does it mean a win? I don't know, but they look more like what they're supposed to look like compared to a year ago.
Yeah, agreed. I think that, they just, it's not that they're small, because I don't believe that at all. I mean, Darnell Wright's 320 pounds, but I mean, he just looks so much better. He looks quicker. His feet look quicker. He looks more nimble when he's moving. Same thing with Jerome Carvin. You're right. I think he took the spare tire and repositioned it, and it's different. I mean, what does it mean? What does it equate to? I think it does equate to them being in better shape to be able to run the type of offense that Heupel and them want to run, to be able to go fast. I asked Cooper Mays, or sometimes, do you even know who's back there behind you at quarterback, or how the result of the play was? And he admitted that a lot of times, if he does know who's back there, he doesn't even know the result of the play, because as soon as it's over, I mean, he's going straight to call the next play and hike the ball. He doesn't know what happened, how it turned out, how they got from point A to point B. He just knows they're there. So when you're going that fast and your center is talking that way, these other linemen, whether it be Darnell or Jerome Carvin or whoever, better be in pretty good shape to withstand that kind of speed.
All right, let me ask you this, both of you guys, this. Take quarterback out of the equation. Guy you're most interested in hearing about after the scrimmage on Thursday?
Probably Byron Young for me. I mean, I can't. I mean, that kid is. I mean, partly because of his story. I mean, it's so incredible, the whole Dollar General thing. But I mean, I don't want to go crazy here, but I mean, I think that kid has a chance to be a dude. And they need, and also because at that position, they're screaming for help. I mean, for somebody to come off the edge and bring pressure.
I think it's easy to go Byron Young. So while I 100% agree with Rob, just to be different, I'll go Tyon Evans. I mean, I think that he's a guy that has done the right things in summer. Looks really good this fall, and I expect he and Jabari and Jalen Wright to really be kind of a three-headed monster for this team. I'm not sure they have any set guy. It's kind of like receiver. Maybe, a different guy running for 100 yards on any given Saturday, but, he just has that kind of it factor to him, and he looks really, really good.
Yeah, I mean, he's a
What
guy.
about you, Bubba?
Do what? Do what, Rob?
I was just asking who
I was going to go. I mean, I'm intrigued by Evans. I really am. And I saw him this summer, and I thought that he looked this summer as, a guy who had put it all together. And not to say he wasn't good in the spring, but he was hurt. We didn't see him. I mean, he looked a guy looked like a guy who was ready to roll. To me, he looks quick. For a guy that big, I'm not saying he's Jalen Wright quick, but he looks athletic and quick. He doesn't just look like a kind of a big round ball out there running around. I mean, I like the way he looks. I'm intrigued by him for sure. And then I'll cheat here and I'll say this. I'm really interested to see where Rodney Garner's entire defensive line is, because I think those guys look a lot better physically. How much better have they gotten? Because I did not think they were a very good group in the spring at all. Just in the 2 days I saw the spring game and that open practice. So how much do they challenge this offensive line out of the gate in this scrimmage? So, those are a couple of guys outside the quarterback position for me that jump out immediately. I'm
going to add in Javonte Payton. I just like the way the kid runs routes. I like his hands. I like his speed.
Hey, man, if he performs as loud as his car is, he's going to be an all-conference player. Because that guy rolls by interviews every day leaving and everybody just stops till he gets out of there with the exhaust on his car. I'm intrigued to see a lot of those guys, but I am intrigued by those two positions as well. Who's been kind of quiet to me, it seems like, and maybe I'm wrong here, not a whole lot of linebacker chatter, and maybe that's just because Brian G. Mary hasn't spoken yet. We haven't heard from a lot of linebackers, but that seems like kind of a quiet group that, not to say they're doing poorly, but they have not generated a whole lot of buzz early on. So we'll see what those guys, what kind of news they make in scrimmage work.
All that changes coming up in just a matter of hours when Brian Jean Marie meets the media. And then I'm sure if you do just what they did with the offensive lineman, you'll hear from linebackers coming up this afternoon.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then it's time to hear some stories on them. Storyline in this with this team that's not being talked about, because hey, give Josh Heupel credit. And I know we've given Bill Martin Sports Information credit. Rob, I mean, they are setting the narrative of this team by the access they're given and the people that are talking. Okay, I mean, they're giving some storylines. Give me a storyline that you're interested in that you're not hearing yet, or it's not been talked about, or do you think it's important?
I mean, I don't know how important, and we've talked about it a little bit, but I like this group of running backs, and I think it's kind of and I think I think the running game is really important in Heupel's offense. I mean, people think about pushing it down the field, and yeah, they do that, but they also, they also really hammer the run game. And I think when you're playing with tempo and can start hitting some creases, I think the run game can be important. And I think the running backs I think they have some pretty quality guys, and it's strange to say when Jabari Smalls is the most experienced dude, but I think I like Smalls. I think he should have played more last year. And like you, I'm intrigued by Tyon Evans. So I think Tennessee's running back room is probably flying completely under the radar just because of the lack of experience. But I think they're going to be pretty quality SEC players in that room, and I think that'll be a big part of the offense.
Storyline no one's talking about us. I go with the fact that by the time Josh Heupel speaks again, it'll be one full week in between when he talks to the media. And in any other year and any other coach, it probably would be a thing. But because there is so much access from a standpoint of every assistant's talking, there's a new guy every day. There's 4 or 5 kids talking every day. It's not a big deal when the head coach don't talk for a full week. And so, like, that never was the case before. And people would be clamoring to want to know what, the head coach said. Like today, think about it. Like, we put the stuff out there about K-Ron, who's going to be out for the year. And, we were, because they were still waiting on one more test. But that test has come back and he's going to be out. I think he likes his staff. I think he hopes to be back a year from now and wants to try to give it one more go. He loves Tennessee football. But they asked Glenn Ellery about it. He said he got to defer to Coach Heupel to talk about injuries. Heupel didn't talk since last Thursday. He ain't gonna talk till this Thursday. But it's not a thing because everybody's just happy with the fact that we're doing in-person interviews. All these assistant coaches are talking. All these players are talking. It's a real game changer.
And it's certainly helping Josh Heupel with his popularity with a lot of fans. I mean, I think they're very obviously very happy with what they've seen. My storyline that I think is of the most significance that's not gotten a ton of play, and it's because he hadn't talked yet, I'm sure, or hasn't visited with the media yet, and they haven't had a scrimmage. I think it's the nickel position. For all the talk offensively about how you got to have the quarterback play to make him go, which is 100% true. If this team's going to be better defensively, they're going to have to play the middle of the field better, which means their nickel guy is going to have to play a lot better than they got from a year ago. And I think the fact that when you sit here and talk about the secondary, you got competition at corner, you feel comfortable with the fact that they've got 2 experienced safeties and Flowers and McCullough, but you got a big old circle around the nickel spot with a big question mark as to who that's going to be. So that's my storyline that probably hasn't got a ton of play. We'll see what kind of assessment Willie Martinez has whenever he visits with the media. I guess probably another week before, or next week before he visits with the media.
Who all's working there, Robert? I've seen Theo Jackson there.
Jackson's there, Slaughter's there. I think the question that I've got for Willie Martinez is, do they move a corner in there? How much are they working a corner in there after we leave? That's going to jump in there, and they got Haddon out there full speed now. Where does he factor in? I think he's a corner more than he is a nickel guy. Does Turnage play in there? Does Taylor play in there? What do they do at that nickel position? I think that starts to sort itself out after this first scrimmage in terms of kind of where you go there. But I think that's a big question mark that's got to be answered about this defense for sure, and over the course of the next 8 days. Because whether you find a starter or not, you got to find kind of your top 2 guys there, and get some depth and get somebody there and leave them if you're going to move somebody to a different position. So we'll see with that one. But to me, that's a big defensive storyline to be answered here over the course of the next 8 days, with a lot of other storylines to be answered, certainly, including the quarterback position, as it's 2 major scrimmages and 2 separation days for that group that's starting to see a little bit of separation as we go at this point. As we head out the door, we'll jump into the mailbag questions later this week. There'll be some recruiting stuff in there, I'm sure. we'll dive into some of that stuff. But we're just going to talk some football here in this podcast. But as we dive out the door here in a few minutes, what were your guys' thoughts on Peyton Manning in the Hall of Fame? What'd you take? Is he the next commissioner of the NFL?
I don't think so. I mean, I think too much. He'd have to take too much of a pay cut from what he's going to be doing in the corporate world. But,
I mean, was that speech the most? As I lose my headset, is that speech the most Peyton Manning speech of all time? I mean, just with all the photos, the presentation that he delivered, the comedy he delivered. I mean, did anybody expect anything less from that guy in that stage and in that moment?
No. I mean, for me, I mean, you expected that. I mean, you go back to his retirement speech. I mean, it was so well thought out, so well constructed. You knew it was going to be that. And I love the fact that, you know, he probably had more to say, but knew he was under time constraints. So he took part of that time to jab everybody for the time constraints. And so, you know, it's about, you know, the picture thing I thought was a very nice and unique touch compared to most. But, you know, I about what I thought it would be, and not surprised that he, you know, kind of went out there and kind of went on a limb about how to grow the game and those type of things, because I think the game is super important to him. And I think, you know, part of him, because, you know, he's coaching, you know, Marshall's team, is, you know, he wants to make sure the game's good for when Marshall gets to that point.
Yeah, I mean, it was vintage Peyton, and I mean, he loves the game.
At some point in time, as part of an ownership group.
Ownership, yeah, I could see that. I mean, I do think he has a genuine concern about the future of the game. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And so, and I think that was, he wanted to use that platform and did. We'll see if anything more comes of it. I'm with you guys. I don't think he's going to be the next commissioner of the NFL, but I'm not surprised that coming out of the weekend, he was the most talked about, most impressive speech that anybody gave, because that's on that stage, that's what he's going to do, and that's certainly what he did. But wish him the best, and congratulations on the gold jacket and being in the Hall of Fame. This Tennessee football team at his alma mater, plenty of work to be done, and we've got plenty of coverage of it all coming up, more today, and then we'll have coverage. We do not get to watch the scrimmage, but Josh Heupel will visit with the media after the scrimmage. We'll see how much of it is he's got to see the film and how much of it he gives an assessment of what things really look like after the scrimmage when it's all said and done. But that's coming up later this week as well. Plenty more recruiting coverage coming up. We'll have some hoop stuff in the war room. Lots of stuff going on. Now it's a great time to be a part of everything going on in the general's quarters and going on at Volquest.com. That's going to do it for this edition of the Blue Water Climate Control Volquest.com podcast. For Austin Price and Rob Lewis, I'm Brent Hubbs. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, everybody.